here we are, Saturday, and sports.
This is The Cross Section with Nate Lull and David Edelstein.
Hello, how are you?
What's going on?
I am. I'm about to make you a co-host of this meeting. Let me remember how to do that.
Going outside. Well, that's a bold move wearing that hat today.
Oh yeah, yep. It's a move. I had a feeling that you were going to say something.
And I haven't looked that much into it, but everyone on Twitter was like, "Oh, well, their picks were terrible." Oh, blah blah blah. But I don't know. So,
have you been following the NFL draft at all? I know you just said you heard about the Packers. I figured I had my Mets pennants behind me last time. Might as well show this affiliation.
Yeah.
I'm an Aaron Rodgers fan, right? He's my favorite athlete.
Awesome. He's awesome, yeah.
And in the first round, the Packers draft a quarterback. And then I'm like, okay, maybe they want to start training someone, the next 4 years that they'll have Rodgers under contract. And I think that he's still healthy and everything. And I mean, look what they did last year, 13-3,
right,
and making it to the NFC Championship and all that. And then they draft a running back with their second pick. And I'm like, they also had Aaron Jones, who was a shocking, amazing running back.
Right.
Someone said they probably have a bias against people named Aaron.
Yeah.
But we'll see. They chose a tight end for pick number 3.
I hadn't seen what they got for pick 3. So.
Yeah, they got a tight end. I couldn't really tell you all the names and everything. There are just so many people. But overall, everyone's been a little confused about the Packers. My family is Jets fans, being from outside New Jersey, not outside New Jersey, outside New York, in New Jersey.
Right.
By the way, it's the New Jersey Jets and New Jersey Giants.
That's right. That's right.
The Meadowlands. Have you seen Roger Goodell, though? Have you turned it on at all?
I haven't, no.
Okay, so they have Roger. Everyone's in, their basements. The coaches, the GMs, the owners, and Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner. And I don't know. I think the coolest thing for me watching it has been seeing all of the different, setups and rooms and, all the pets that everyone has.
Beautiful, yeah.
That's something you don't normally get. You see them, all in their work mode. They're the sports icons. But now we're just seeing them, in their downstairs basement or kitchen with their dog running around and their kids with them. And I think that's pretty cool, actually.
That is cool. I haven't seen it, but I heard Jerry Jones's is, absurd.
I don't know.
Yacht or something. So.
Oh, yeah. I've been hearing everyone talk about the yacht. I haven't seen the yacht yet. I'll have to look it up after this.
Yeah.
I saw Bill Belichick and his dog. They were like, we've learned the secret to the Patriots' success.
There it is.
The dog makes the picks. He gives him a treat and walks away. But I think that's actually really humanizing, Often in sports, we look to sports figures as people that are like, wow, I see them on TV. They're leading the Packers. They're leading this team that I love, and they're players. At the end of the day, they're just, players. They're just people also.
Right, just people.
So, and that's cool what we get to do at high school sports level is we know that they are, they're kind of becoming the sports icons for their communities and telling their stories about the people. So
that's cool.
I don't know. So what's your past week been like? What's kind of the biggest story this week?
I've just been trying to pump out the podcasts and it's really about it. I mean, it's working home, and the days are going fast though, so that's kind of cool.
I've noticed that it feels like the days are going by really fast, but it's like, wow, we're in week 7 of all of this happening in sports, which, that sounds like a long time because it is, but every day feels really long, but I'm like, wow, it's already week 7 here.
Right.
But
yeah, it is going fast.
I've been doing more sports features this week where I'm talking to some student athletes about their seasons. So I'm sure we'll talk about that, just about, how they're saying they feel and the developments that have taken place this week.
Right.
You actually mentioned that there were some sections that actually canceled their spring sports now in New York. So what other information do you have on that?
Just the state, the last time I had talked to Zayas, had just said we're going to have each section do a little study on what they're thinking. And so the first two sections to go down were 8 and 11, which are pretty much Long Island and right above New York City. So it makes sense. They're the hardest hit areas, and I think they just probably had to. So I'll be interested to see what Zayas has to say this week, because he had put a deadline of April 29th on everything for the state to make another announcement. And I know that they've had some meetings down here in Section 4 about what they want to do, so I can talk about that as well.
Well, Section 3, once Governor Cuomo extended the schools to being closed through May 15th, next day, Section 3 Executive Director John Rathbun came out with a message online saying, in coordination with what the governor has set as the new reopen date, Section 3 will also correspond with that. And so spring sports are now moved to the 15th of May.
Yep.
Whereas originally it was the 15th of April. That passed. Then it was, I believe, the 29th of April,
Right.
which is probably why the Director Zayas also chose that day, I can imagine.
Yep.
But now we're going to hit that this week.
Yeah. So I'm assuming we're going to get something from Zayas this week. It'll probably just be some sort of extension again, but I should have looked it up, but I know that New York is one of the last states that's still trying to hang on and make it possible. So as much as people are like complaining and stuff, at least I got to give them credit that we're still trying.
Yeah, I mean, when does schools normally end? Mid-June, right?
Yeah.
So to say that, hey, they're still looking to say, okay, even if it's a month, even if it's just a few practices, even if it's just a few scrimmages, whatever it winds up being, that they want to give them that opportunity and they haven't full out canceled. I think that's obviously the players, I'm sure, are happy to hear that. That it's not canceled. But so what did you hear from Section 4?
Basically, like the athletic directors this week were having a Zoom meeting, and they were also meeting with the official coordinators to see if they get clearance, could they put together some sort of like a mini schedule and a mini tournament and at least crown like a league champion. So if they could get a couple games in and somehow have like a mini tournament, they were trying to figure out the logistics of that if everything gets cleared. So
interesting. And so would it be within the section itself? You're saying that they were proposing that the teams would be able to kind of play each other and just kind of see what a record runs up being.
And I think this was even at just a league level, like just play the teams in your league and call it good.
I'm all for having some kind of competition, whether, obviously that's what sports are, is playing against each other.
Right.
I'm curious to think, though, that, some of the student athletes I've been speaking with have told me they're trying to do workouts. Some of them have been doing stuff in their gym. They're running outside around wherever they are, just to try and get some movement in. But you got to think that they're not in the full shape that they would have been. And even with the 2 weeks that usually you have to practice, those 2 weeks would just be getting back to like now we're 2 weeks away from being ready.
Yeah.
And there's only a month now anyway if they come back on the 15th. So, I in my thoughts, I imagine it would be more of like kind of scrimmages. If they do I would be personally hesitant to try and crown someone the section champion at this point when it's just such a abbreviated season. You don't have time to really figure that out, right? And they're not even in full shape anyways. I liked what Rob Zayas told me late March, I think, about just getting them wearing their jerseys and playing again rather than trying to crown a champion.
Right. Yeah.
How do you feel about, Section 3 and 4 are still going, like we said, but the sections that canceled, what are your thoughts on that kind of decision? Obviously that takes them out of any kind of state thing that might occur, if anything does.
I think unfortunately geographically they just kind of had to do it. Like that area just seems to have the most cases and everyone's being extra cautious. So I think they just felt like they really had to do it just to be responsible. So, but I don't think, it's not official yet, but I don't think we were going to have a state tournament anyways. So they're going to miss that. Sure, there's not going to be a state tournament. So I feel bad that they won't even get those scrimmages, but that area is just seems like it's the most hardest hit in the entire country. So it just seems like they had to do it.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting that Section 3 is so our biggest school, the Class AA school, is Proctor. And basically, I'm pretty sure it was right in March, right after schools closed and sports were suspended, Proctor canceled its spring sports seasons itself. So not the section, not the league or anything, and obviously not the state, but the school decided not to do it.
Right.
So I was actually speaking to one of the senior baseball players this past week. I'm going to be doing a story on him soon. Jason De Jesus is his name. And he was telling me that, it's obviously unfortunate that Proctor canceled their sports seasons. They wanted to play, whereas everyone else is we don't know what's going to happen for sure yet. I thought it was interesting that the school kind of decided, and I don't really have more information to comment on that. But what I do have in mind that's interesting from our discussion with Jason and I was that he mentioned that this was kind of going to be his year to prove himself as a senior, a guy who's been on the varsity baseball team for 3 years, and prove that, he had good stats in the past, but that this was going to be his year to really shine, to show that he put in even more work, was going to go out there and play and hopefully get for his dream, he said, was to play for a D1 school. And now he's kind of saying, I don't know if I'm going to get those same looks. Maybe, I'm going to have to think about community college and working for a team there, playing for a team there, Division III maybe, or Division II, and then hopefully move on to another school and transfer possibly. But it's interesting how that story, I'm sure it applies to a lot of athletes, how of seniors, their kind of next step in their educational and sporting careers is kind of affected because they don't have that chance to showcase their talents one more time.
Right. No, totally agree.
What do you think about Cooperstown? I haven't gotten a chance to talk about Cooperstown baseball, but I imagine for you, that's a team you followed. They won the section last year, and they were supposed to return like the whole team of seniors.
Yeah, they're pretty crushed. I talked to their assistant coach this week, and he's like, I feel selfish saying this, but he's like, I can't believe that we might not get this chance. Like, great team, great kids, something they look forward to all year. So they were pretty bummed out, but they're still holding out some hope that they'll get something. But yeah, that's a team that I fully expected to be covering into June. So it's too bad. But
speaking about Otsego County and baseball, one thing that I learned that's just interesting, I did a story not this past week, but the week before about Otsego County tourism.
Yep.
And it turns out of $206 million that the tourism brings into Otsego County, 150 million, so nearly 75%, nearly $3 of every $4 is from the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Right. That's I can believe that for sure.
There's a squirrel over here kind of staring me down. I think it wants to join in on the conversation.
Gonna make his debut.
Yeah, please don't come up here.
Yeah.
I don't want it. That's okay. Squirrels, they can stay there. So for all state teams, they came out this week. And for the boys' large school basketball, all state teams, Class AA and Class A. We spoke about the smaller schools last week. I know that you had mentioned that you don't really have many big schools in your coverage area. Obviously, there are ones in Section 4. But are there any players that you know of or that have stood out and you've heard of from Section 4 that made it on the teams and are noteworthy?
Yeah, I don't cover in my regular coverage any AA or A schools. I did get to see the A sectional final down in Binghamton between Johnson City and Maine Endwell. And I had seen Johnson City one other time in a tournament this year, and their big guy, Xavier Hill, is phenomenal to watch. He's also a great football player. He reminds me of someone when you see those clips on the NFL draft and they're showing like his high school basketball clips as well. Like, he's that guy. He's like a 6'6" linebacker, and all of a sudden he takes it in the paint and he can just throw down a dunk. And warm-ups before the refs comes out, he's doing windmills and 360s, and it's like, wow. So he was on the fourth team. He was the highest guy that we had. in Class A locally, and that was well deserved. And then one other guy that stood out to me is Connor Green from Maine Endwell, and he's like another 6'7" big guy who I think has a good future in college because I know he works hard. And his dad, Corey Green, was a phenomenal player at Whitney Point back when they won the state championship. He had spent some time in Sydney as an administrator, and so I got to know him a little bit. And now he's the superintendent down in Owego. So I've always just paid attention to Connor because I knew that relationship. Maine Endwell did lose the sectional final to JC, to Johnson City, but it was a great game. And you can tell that rivalry because all the schools in Binghamton are kind of packed together. There's a few that, even though their school district is pretty big, the school buildings are pretty close to each other. Like one that comes to mind is Vestal and Union Endicott, right across a bridge from each other. If the lights are on the football field, you can see it from the other school. So to me, those rivalries are always fun. It's a short bus ride, and it's kind of like city bragging rights. So to see those two in the sectional final was definitely a lot of fun. And I think Xavier is one of the best guys in the area for sure. I didn't get to see any of the AA guys play. I know there was one guy from Binghamton, one guy from Elmira. I wish I got to see more of those schools play, but I'm more north in Section 4. The most south I go is Harpersville, which is about 15 minutes outside of Binghamton. So I try to catch those guys if we get down to the arena for some of those games, but didn't get to see them. But congratulations to them all. I mean, I think making from Section 4, if you can make all state in A or AA, like you've had a fantastic season.
Even honorable mention too.
Yeah.
Getting on the list is a lot because I mean, they're the big schools. So to say that there are so many more players, I imagine, or there's just more teams, or there's a lot of competition to get on a varsity team with more people involved. So to be on the honorable mention list or any of the teams is incredible. So congratulations to all of them too.
Yeah, I think it's hard too because if you look through the list, you see a lot of schools, especially AA, that I don't know exactly how they're classified, but they look like private schools. They play in Catholic leagues, and so I think you're competing with a lot of those type of schools that might recruit and have some of those type of ties. So I think it's hard because the level of player that you're seeing is just crazy high.
It's interesting because here in Utica area where the bigger schools are, as you go from the city and then spread out, they get a little bit smaller. But a lot of Proctor's rivals, you could say, are the bigger schools that are really out in Syracuse. I mean, that's who they're playing a lot of the time. So they're telling me about, schools that come to mind that are bigger out there. Like there's Nottingham, there's James DeWitt. I forget exactly what class those particular schools are in, but those Syracuse area schools are the ones that are kind of the Proctor rivals. Liverpool, I know, in the section first round of sectionals this year for Proctor boys basketball. There's this whole thing going on about, did Liverpool lose on purpose their last game so that they could come and play us as the 10 seed and then go Proctor as the 7 seed? Right. And Proctor actually wound up beating them on a buzzer beater. They were down there like the whole game. And they came Cam Johnson, who actually got honorable mention for Class AA All-State. He hit a buzzer beater final second of the game, and everyone stormed the court to beat Liverpool in the first round of sectionals. So there's that whole thing going on. The local rivals are, New Hartford here, Whitesboro. Those are both Class A for basketball, and had pretty impressive seasons. The one other Section 3 area that I cover player that got honorable mention for Class A was Griff Shortino from Whitesboro. Right. And the interesting thing about Whitesboro this year, they went 20-0 in the regular season, first undefeated season, like 70 years almost. And they were looking to win their first sectional title since 1972, but they lose by 1 point to Bishop Grimes in the first round of sectionals. 49-48 was 1 point. That's a low-scoring game to begin with. And so that was, I was speaking to the team all year about, what's going on, how is this possible? And head coach Greg Hertham told me afterward. I caught up with him a few weeks later to just, recap the season and say thanks for all of his communication. And he was like, we knew that they were going to be a hard team coming in. They played a hard schedule all year, but it's just crazy how every point counts.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about that undefeated team, including Griff Shortino, who got honorable mention for Class A, was that not one player during the regular season scored an average of double digits, and they went undefeated.
So they were just the true definition of the team.
It was so cool to watch, to see how, and that was the story all season, preseason, midseason, end of the season. They kept. Sometimes it's weird when a team says the same answer all year about what's being so successful because you think things might change a bit.
Right.
But they were seriously telling me that it's just we don't care who scores, we just want to win. And you'd see certain players hit from three, they'd be on point. Some players would get up to the basket. Some would, hitting layups. Some hitting jumper twos. And the amount of passing, the fast-paced game, it was just really cool to watch. Statistically, not one player stood out because the whole team stood out.
Right. That's really cool.
Griff Shortino actually ended the season, I checked, with a 10.2 points per game average after that final game against Bishop Grimes. So it brought him up into the double digits for the season, but the regular season everyone was below 10.0.
That's wild. You don't see that very often.
No, and commenting again on Cam Johnson for Class AA, he scored 35 points in that game against Liverpool in the first round of sectionals. Proctor lost in the second round of sectionals, but he even got hurt. They played a 1-point game against Whitesboro too. Whitesboro won that 1-point game, and he had injured his hand on a fall against the game at New Hartford at Proctor, but he just came back no matter he had the cast on. He healed. He was playing. He was there for his team. And I'm not advocating playing if you're injured. But, it must not have been that bad. They must have decided, you're okay to play. But to see what he was still putting up and the moves he was still making while injured is just impressive. I mean, they both deserve to be on those lists somewhere. And they both wound up as honorable mention.
Well, good.
So that's kind of our the big schools rundown for Now, I should have checked on this, but when do you have a sense of when the state said the girls' teams are going to be announced?
Yeah, it should be out. Wednesday. So they send out a pre-list on Monday, so that you can go through and spell check anybody that is in your area, and then Wednesday at noon it should be out. So
okay.
We can talk about that too. So
yeah, that when that happens, we should definitely. That's kind of next week. We'll pay attention to at Nate Lull on Twitter, at David Z Edelstein on Twitter, and we'll get you the updates midweek. The other thing about Whitesboro that I want to mention is that their seniors, they're losing a bunch of seniors, so it will be interesting to see how the team kind of rebounds from that and how, they didn't think they were going to go undefeated. I don't think you can predict that.
Yeah, right.
Zach Britt, Nick Sardina, Ryan Cardone, Connor Montrose, and Griff Shortino are their seniors that are obviously not going to be back next year. And that was a big core of their team. So it'd be interesting to see how do these teams kind of replicate success the next year, or do they put those expectations on them? I don't think you can expect to go undefeated.
No, that's a tall task for sure.
How often do these smaller schools get to play maybe some of these bigger schools and travel? I know that there's some cross-class play often, and last week we spoke about some that might start happening more often because coaches know each other cross-section, cross-class. How often do you find one of the teams that you do cover that's a B, C, or D school that might get to play up to an A or even maybe a double A?
It depends. What's interesting, if you're in the league, like the Stack that Oneonta and Norwich are in, they're both B schools, but within their league, there's A's and double A's. So they are kind of the small guy on the block, but they get to do that in league play. Besides that, it's kind of rare because you're taking a risk as a bigger school to play a smaller school for sectional points, because all the risk is on the bigger school. If you, in Section 4, if you're a smaller school and you play up and say a C beats an A, you get more points for your sectional seeding. And if you're the A school and you lose to the C, you get nothing. So I find that a lot of the bigger schools might not want to play a smaller school. They don't want to take that risk, and they're trying to get their own points by playing a double A, or a B's playing an A. So it's kind of this numbers game. I wish that we saw more of it, because to me it's very intriguing, but I understand why coaches might not want to do it all the time.
Yeah, it's an interesting system there. Like we had said, it's kind of like game theory. It's just a matter of risk, and if there's so much more to gain from playing your own class or higher, and there's a lot more to lose than there was potentially to gain from playing the smaller school, it just makes more. It makes logical sense. It's like the prisoner's dilemma and things like that, game theory, to just say, hey, the average we'd gain is negative 3/4 of a point.
Yeah.
If you play a lower school. Why are we going to play a game that is worth negative 3/4 of a point when we could play one? Maybe we'll lose a point potentially, but the average, like the middle ground of playing a same school or bigger school, is at least 0 or +2. That's
if you're a smaller school and you go up and you play and you still lose, you still get more points, at least in Section 4, than if you play someone your own size and win. So I know a lot of coaches that are like, hey, even if I go and I'm a D school and I play a B and we lose, that's a good experience. Even though I don't get the win on my record, I'm going to get more points. And at the end of the day, it might be better for them when they get to the seeding time.
And so for Section 4, for qualifications for sectionals, is it based on those points completely, not the record at all?
Yeah, I mean, there are some things where the record gets factored into it, but I find that most of the teams that are playing that game of trying to get more points they know that they're going to have a good enough record to get in. So that's where they're trying to say, hey, if I play a couple extra games, I could jump from a 5 to a 3 seed, maybe get this team at home. A lot of teams too that want to try to get out of that 7, 8, 9 range and jump up to 5 or 6 and get a home game. So that's where I find that those teams are playing that game the most.
In Section 3, it's that you need to have a 400 average based on your record. So it's either a 400 overall record in total for the season, no matter who you played, 400 record in your class. So if you're Class C school, other Class C schools, so like the B school that you might have played up or the D school you might have played down, that's taken out. Just need a 400 against C, or 400 in your league, in your division league, which different phrasing is used, but it means the same thing. So it's not based on this point system, which again opens up the possibility for, like we had talked about, the Poland girls team to play the West Canada Valley girls team. I don't know I forget if they did, but they were, they're located right near each other.
Right.
And that gives them the opportunity to play. Whereas I could see if they were Section 4 or based on the points, West Canada might be like, I don't know, I don't want to really play the D school. And it does turn out, now that I'm looking at the schedule, Poland and West Canada Valley did play each other, being right next to each other and not having the point system. On December 21st, West Canada, the C school, beat Poland, the D school, 64-48. Right. And did they play again? They did. They played at Poland, where West Canada Valley won 46-34. So they did play each other at a home and home. And West Canada won both of them. And they went, like we had talked about, into sectionals pretty far. Poland was very good too. So that's definitely, it was probably, each of those was a pretty good game, even though the first one was a little more lopsided. Both teams were, in their respective classes, very good.
Right.
So, but we get to see that kind of local rivalry. Whereas I can imagine if they went by the point system like you described, they might not want to as much, even though they're next door neighbors.
Right.
Poland might want to in that case. The Class D school might want to.
Yeah, the D's always want the bigger game. Yeah,
The D's can, they can. Any other school that's not a Class D is a bigger school.
yeah.
So
Yeah, the D's have nothing to, because if they lose, they're like, oh well, it's a C. We're supposed to lose, but if they win, they're like, oh, we won.
Yeah, and it's not like a Class D can be the bigger school ever, because there's no Class E.
No,
Nothing smaller.
Low as we go. So
So
I'm going to have a podcast guest this week who has done like a whole study about state funding and how that's going to affect things along with COVID for the future going forward for small schools, like what they might have to do based on state aid. Are we going to see more mergers to save sports programs? Because if this money starts to dry up, and also he's looked at the amount of kids we have in school, how that's going to be. If we project that out 5 years at a Class C and D level, are we going to have enough kids to even have teams? So are you going to have to see schools merge to keep their programs? So, schools like the Oriskany's and stuff like that, are they going to have to merge in 5 years if the current trend continues? So I think that's going to be really interesting, and I can't wait to hear what he has to say.
yeah, I know that for Oriskany specifically, it's interesting that you bring them up. For soccer this past year, the boys team was combined for the first time. It was Westmoreland to Oriskany.
Right.
But they went under the Westmoreland name. But it was the first year being combined for soccer.
Right.
Speaking of rivals, they're typically the rivals against each other there. So it was cool to cover their soccer season this fall. And then they went pretty far into sectionals. I'm pretty sure they were in the finals, but lost.
I remember seeing that they were combined and checking on it.
They had Westmoreland boys, which includes the Westmoreland University combined team for the first year. They won their semifinals game by on penalty kicks, and then lost the finals game on penalty kicks.
Oh, that's rough.
Bishop Grimes defeated Westmoreland Oriskany 2-1. It was at VVS, and it was in penalty kicks. So that kind of ouch, a little sad.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to cover them because, again, they're the rivals, and they did really well together.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see how they continue that next year.
Right.
Or whether other programs, like you said, will combine over time. So you were mentioning the person that you have going to speak this week. Of your past week here doing podcasts, it looked like you got 3 of them up for the Nate Lull podcast, or a pretty good number at least. What was one of the more interesting things that you heard from this time?
Yeah, I did 4 this week, and I'm trying to remember them all now off the top of my head. But I'd say one of the more interesting ones was I talked to a girl who was a really good field hockey player in Sydney. And then she went on and had a really great career, Division III at William Smith out in Geneva. And then she joined AmeriCorps and did a fundraising walk across America trip. And just kind of hearing about some of her stories and why she was on that journey was really neat and interesting. And I didn't know much about it going in. I just knew that she had attempted this walk. So to hear some more about that was really interesting. So I'd say that was probably one of the coolest ones of the week. And then the one I did on Thursday was with the St. Bonaventure women's basketball coach, who happens to be from our neck of the woods in Bainbridge, Guilford. And just hearing his story of, he started there as a student manager and now he's the head coach, and just hearing about his journey and some of the early days. He actually worked camps there in the summer and slept in the locker room and worked maintenance. So I just thought that was the ultimate story of from the bottom to the top. So that was really cool.
What is it for you that makes these stories so powerful?
I just think it's neat from our area. It's a small area to see all the different stories and people overcoming big obstacles. And I think sometimes when you're from a small school, the sense I get is that oh, there's not enough opportunities and it's hard to go out and do big things. And it's like, look at all these stories right here in our backyard that we've discovered in the last couple of weeks of just people doing amazing things, overcoming obstacles, overcoming illnesses. So I think that's been great to share those stories and hear more from those people. And I've heard from, someone from Unitigo that they didn't know this about this person from Sydney, which is right down the road. So you're just learning about things in your own backyard, about athletes you've probably seen in games or coaches. And so it's neat to just learn more about those. I think the one I really enjoyed was last Friday. Spoke with a coach, a softball coach from Afton, who has won 16 straight sectional titles at one point. So some of the numbers that she had with her teams were pretty amazing.
I love to hear the mindset of people about how do you kind of achieve that success? How do you do that in sport? And then what I find is that people often relate their stories of sport to real life, not that sport's not real life, but the broader life lessons. That there's something about the sport atmosphere that's a learning ground, a sandbox for understanding how to work with people and teams and succeed outside of sport too. And like you said, people overcoming things. So like the mindset of success there for the 15 sectional titles in a row, or overcoming things. I spoke with, as I've been doing these features, I spoke with Whitesboro boys ice hockey players because, again, their season got cut off for sectionals. And states, rather. They were in the semifinals, and it got cut off. And I was speaking to Drew Manley, who's a senior captain, and he was talking about how he started the year with a hip injury, and he couldn't play for the first few weeks of the season. He was still recovering. He was basically bedridden. He had crutches. And he told me about how he kind of was still there for his team, and how the whole message that he took away from that is that less actions speak louder than words. And it's funny because his teammates and the coaches, when I spoke with them, always told me that Drew was kind of a quieter person to begin with, a quieter captain, that he was there to lead by example. And that's kind of what he did during this injury and kept showing up. And so how that message is applied. And not only that, but he's now told me, I asked him, what are you doing next? What is the next step in your education, in work, in athletics, any of that? What are you doing after graduation from high school? And he said that he thinks first of all, he's playing for the Utica Junior Comets for hockey. So that's pretty cool.
Good.
He's just going to take part-time classes for MVCC that he's been doing classes already. So he could still get the associate's degree in time if he takes part-time next year because he has credits. But the interesting thing is he goes, I want to study sports medicine. And had I not asked him what his biggest challenge was through his playing career or anything, maybe I wouldn't have known this. But all of a sudden, I said, wait a second, do you think that, is the reason you're choosing sports medicine as a potential goal for the future because of this injury that you went through? He goes, yeah, 100%. I've always wanted to be involved in a team, but now I know what it's like to overcome like an injury like that.
Right.
So it's cool how, for me, it's kind of, I like sports. I had played sports, 4th grade, scored the winning run in the Little League World Series, like I said, but it was, I like sports, and I found out that I could talk about them and go to them and tell the stories. But for an athlete who's going to continue playing and then eventually wants to be on that side, with the team, it's cool to see how the experience that he learned so much from in sport as a high schooler with an injury has now influenced his future career choice.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I've heard that from athletes down here as well if they've gone through big injuries. I'm going to talk to a guy in the podcast this week that had he'd torn up both knees essentially in his college soccer career, and he's getting into sports medicine as well and wants to help other people. So that's so inspiring to see when athletes do that and get into that field of work.
And I love these stories on a regular basis, but especially now when we can find them, when there aren't other sports going on, there aren't these other moments of excitement. And that's what it is. What was the ABC, when ABC had the Olympics, their motto was the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat, right? Right. Kind of overcoming struggles, obstacles, the underdog team, all that kind of stuff in sports, and seeing how people work together and accomplish things together. We don't have that on a regular basis as far as teams are concerned because no one's playing. So to get that from the personal level and really dig deep on who these people are as people, again, that's what I really think is a humanizing factor of all of it.
Yeah, it's always great. And I feel like I've learned so much just from starting the podcast. Stories that I maybe knew were there, but didn't know the full depth of what people had gone through and learning about that struggle. So it's neat to have this time in a way to explore those options more. And one of the people I talked with last week said it's such an interesting time right now. It's so hard, but at the same time, um, this is a time where things are going to change and you're going to have the most freedom that you've ever had to explore things and do things outside of the box. And I thought that was an interesting perspective on that.
Do you think that these video game kind of sessions that we're seeing online where MLB players are playing the MLB video game or the NBA players are playing the NBA video game, will those continue even when everything comes back to normal? Maybe it's like an off-season entertainment?
I think in some way, shape, or form they will. I've seen a lot of other teams get together, have like a Zoom chat, and like the Boston Bruins 2011 team that won the cup was getting together and watching that game on a Zoom call, and just their comments, and it was funny, and you're hearing those behind the scenes stories. It was almost like a documentary. I could totally see something like that continuing on, because it's just like you're hearing all these stories that we probably never would have heard unless they were doing this. So I could totally see that continuing on. Something is going to change because of all this and the way we view and cover sports. So I hope it does in a way. I think it would be cool.
Almost in the same way that we're hoping this works, is that it just feels like people are hanging out with the players, the team, that they're just listening in on a conversation with them as if you're hanging out with them while watching the documentary. That sounds pretty cool. I wonder, too, if the way, just because of the nature of this virus, which is being near people is how it spreads, whether, like, how do we get back to fans in games? And will people be just maybe not afraid, but conscious of how close everyone is in a packed arena or packed NFL stadium or packed high school gym?
Yeah, I wonder if we'll even see anything like that until we have a true vaccine that we can put some trust in. I don't know if people are going to want to be in that concert type of atmosphere where you're bumping into people or going to a major league game, or like you said, even a high school game. When you talk about going and sitting in the bleachers and you're surrounded by people and people are climbing over you and stepping over you, I don't know when we're going to get back to that, just because there is this fear right now. So it could be a while, but hopefully not. So.
I'll tell you, the first game back is probably going to be insane. The first game back with full fans and everything, when that's possible and allowed and all of that and safe, that will be quite the atmosphere.
I agree, because I think everyone's going to be anxious. They're going to want to be there to say they were there. They're going to want to get out of the house. But yeah, I think it'll be a monumental event, no matter if you're going to a high school game or a pro game, a college game, just to get back to normal. It'll be interesting.
Yeah. And the cool thing is our jobs are to be there, to experience it and be able to then tell people about it.
Yeah, getting to tell that story is special.
It's going to be interesting. It's going to be cool. At some point, we're going to get back to sports. We're going to get back to being together. And I'm just curious to think about how that will be and how that will take place. But I do know for a fact that sports will play a role in bringing us together like they always do.